Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our second virtual TL Insider Fireside Chat of the year with guest Matthew Price, General Manager of Uber Canada, as we discuss the future of urban mobility and Uber's move towards becoming a zero-emission transportation platform. Some quick housekeeping rules. Please make sure to ask any questions you may have or leave any comments in the chat box at the bottom of your screen throughout the event, but we'll also open up an audience Q&A at the very end of the chat, so stay tuned for that. Thank you so kindly, Matthew, for being here today and for joining us. Now I'd like to introduce our host, Jason Magnoy, Head of Business Development at St. Joseph Media. Now take it away, Jason.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Chantel, and welcome. Matthew Price is the General Manager of Uber Canada. He is responsible for leading ride sharing in one of Uber's biggest global markets with millions of users across 20 cities. Matt has been with Uber since 2015, and most recently, he was the head of strategy and planning for Northern and Eastern Europe. Over 4 years, he helped to lead the transformation in Europe of distributed startup to integrated multinational. Matt's team partners with Uber leadership across 15 countries to develop strategy and drive effective execution while leading some of Uber's most strategic cross-functional programs. Thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you for joining us, Matthew.
Thank you for having me, Jason.
So my first question is, how are you, and how have you been holding up during the pandemic?
Isn't that how all of these start? How are you? So, look, all things considered, I'm doing pretty well. I think kind of the days where I'm in the mindset of thinking about myself relative to others, I feel super fortunate. Have an exciting job. Friends and family, for the most part, are safe. If I'm in the mindset of just being kind to myself, it's been a tough year personally, tough year professionally. I moved back to this vibrant city to take over a business that moves people from A to B. And obviously at a time when we're encouraging people not to move, hasn't been easy. At the same time, I mean, I'm very much a believer in, balancing credible hope and brutal honesty as kind of a way to build resilience and as a way to lead. And I think when I look at, vaccines rolling out, when I think about the role that Uber can play in helping cities build back better, there's a lot to be optimistic about. I think it's going to be an exciting year ahead.
Tell us about your career journey to Uber. What brought you to the company?
Yeah, happy to. So I was that kid that wanted to be a business person from a really, really young age, from the age that I could kind of reach up to the desk and play on my dad's big laptop. I went to Queen's School of Business to really kind of start my foray into business, to get a bit of a taste of leadership. And from there, started my career in strategy consulting with Monitor Group, which became Monitor Deloitte. I chose that as a platform to really maximize my learning, get exposure to the real world of business, working with Fortune 500 CEOs across North America to help them unlock growth. I came to absolutely love solving the difficult business problems, but I think over time kind of had more of a desire to get closer to the action, to really own the outcomes and be responsible for impact. And that led me to decide to move out of consulting, to complement that experience with an MBA and go to INSEAD, which is a global business school based in Singapore and France. I have been to something like 55 countries, have a real passion for exploring the different cultures of the world, and thought that would be a cool way in a classroom of 90 nationalities to build my global network, to really kind of refine my global business perspectives. And from there, in fact, got really lucky in that Uber was hiring one of its first strategy and planning people outside of the US. And it ticked the boxes for me. It was a role, at the heart, operational strategy, a game-changing business, something based in London, which is what I was looking to do. And that was my entry point into Uber. As you said at the top, spent 4 years partnering with general managers across 15 countries to help to build our business in Europe, focus on implementing structure, driving strategy, building capabilities, and then had the privilege of getting to take a step even closer to the action, coming back home to Canada and being responsible for impact here. And it's just a real privilege to get to do this in my home country.
So I think this idea of strategy is now just, obviously it's incredibly important during this pandemic. And everyone has been talking about the pivot. So For TL Insider, we pivoted. We're doing this virtual experience over Zoom. Usually we'd be in our office. We'd have wine, we'd have cheese. It'd be phenomenal. It'd be a great night. So how has Uber pivoted during the pandemic and as a mobility company? And how has the company built resilience during this challenging time? And as a global company, have your pivots been different in different cities?
Really, really good question. So let me talk first about how I think about our pivots, and then I'll reflect a bit on how we built resiliency. So, if I think back on Uber starting last March, when the pandemic came to Canada, I really think of it in three chapters. So the first chapter for us was really buttoning down the hatches. We could see the tidal wave coming, and we knew we needed to do something quickly. So if I think back on what we did during that phase, we shut down Uber Pool, one of our marquee products, recognizing we didn't want people sharing vehicles if they didn't need to. We implemented a no mask, no ride policy and program where you all of a sudden had a checklist before you could go online. We built verification technology to check that you were in fact wearing a mask, both riders and drivers. We started distributing PPE to drivers. To date, have distributed about 1.75 million units across Canada. We launched a financial assistance policy to drivers who were quarantined or who had contracted COVID. We started to build our relationships with public health authorities, help them with contact tracing. And we worked really hard at communicating with drivers, helping them understand the emergency relief benefit, helping them understand what we were doing to try to keep them safe on the road. Chapter 2 was then, as I describe it, kind of in the eye of the storm. It was eerily quiet when we encouraged our riders not to ride. And all of a sudden, the business that we built had really just gone dormant. So what we asked ourselves is, hey, how can we have impact? What can we do to leverage this platform for the good of Canadian society? And we made at that point a $6 million commitment to help frontline workers, vulnerable communities, and give them free and discounted trips to get to where they needed to go. And we called that our Move What Matters campaign, focused on moving the things that matters. And then chapter 3 was really about building back better. It was thinking about kind of how do we emerge from this stronger than we went in. And for us, that was launching a product called Uber Connect to use our technology to help you in a contactless way get packages and goods from A to B. Send a care package to your loved ones was a real way it was used. We launched Uber in Halifax and in Winnipeg, recognizing the importance of ride sharing during a pandemic to help people who don't have access to their own private vehicles safely get from A to B. And as we're going to talk about here in a moment, we launched a product called Uber Green, which is our EV and hybrid product. If I then think back on kind of how we built resilience and why this was a period to really strengthen our resolve. I mean, one of our cultural norms at Uber is we persevere. And I mean, back to the days of delete Uber, the regulatory challenges we've had at times. I mean, we are a resilient company. It's in our DNA. But I think three ways that we probably emerged stronger from this, and we'll look back on the pandemic being something that did in fact strengthen our resiliency. One, we built deeper, stronger relationships with cities. Be it the policymakers in cities, be it non-governmental organizations that operate in cities. I think those folks do see us as part of the solution. Uber Eats has obviously used this as a time to kind of help people eat in times when they can't go out. But certainly for Uber, it's been an opportunity to build a second core business, and we now have an opportunity for Rides and Eats to collaborate in new ways. And last but not least, I mean, from a cultural point of view, I think we have, ironically, deeper relationships now internally than we did before the pandemic. I think people kind of showed up in a slightly different way, more vulnerable than they were before, and it's allowed us to build tighter connections with our colleagues that will serve us well into the future.
I love the way that you position that. It's almost like it's Uber helps sort of dictate a relationship that people do have with their city. And the fact that I interact with Uber basically every day now, I find that really interesting. And that actually takes me to my next point, which is the ultimate sort of way that we can sort of improve and strengthen the relationship with a city is the ultimate pivot for Uber seems to be this move to zero emissions. When I read that, I was like, how are you going to do that? So how will Uber How will Uber do that, and what is the process towards moving into that fully green, sustainable future?
So let me start and just tell you about why this is something that we fronted into in the first place. And COVID-19 for many of us has just been a moment of pause. It's been a moment to take a step back and reflect on kind of what we do and why we do it. And at Uber, you look out the window and you see cities that are breathing in ways they haven't before. You know, the skies are cleaner, there's fewer cars on the road. And we kind of said, hey, as market leaders, as the largest ride-sharing platform in the world and here in Canada, we have a bit of a responsibility to think about, you know, how we use this as a moment to pivot. And on the back of that, we made a commitment that by 2030, in all cities around the world, all cities in Canada with supportive policies, we would be fully emission zero. And by 2040, in every city that we operate in globally. And you know, we also recognize that, you know, commitments are one thing, but you have to have the actions that back it up, that actually allow you to deliver on that commitment. So there's 4 key things that we've been starting on to get us to where we want to go, and where we want to go being something that's very aligned with the kind of commitments the Canadian government's made in terms of the Paris Climate Accord. Frankly, it's also aligned with the expectations that I think Canadians have of businesses. So 4 things. Let me tell you about them. One is a product called Uber Green, which is our EV and hybrid product. So you as a rider now, and in fact, today we just expanded this to 10 more cities across Canada, which I'm really happy to tell you about. So now in 14 cities across this country, you can request a vehicle that's EV or hybrid for a $1 surcharge as kind of our first step in this direction. The second thing we've done is globally, we created an $800 million Clean Future program that's intending to address the barriers to ultimately make this transition. And what that means is we need to find ways to get more drivers into electric vehicles. We need to find ways to improve access to charging infrastructure on our streets. So the Clean Future program brings down the cost of EVs to drivers. The starting point there is a partnership we have with General Motors to give them a discount on electric vehicles. It also helps drivers earn more in that every Uber Green trip a driver takes, they'll earn an extra 50 cents a trip. Every trip that a driver in an electric vehicle takes on our platform at any point, they'll earn an extra $1 a trip. So, you know, a driver driving an electric car on an Uber Green trip can earn an extra $1.50 a trip, which is quite meaningful. The third thing we've done is we've launched a product called Journey Planning in Montreal, Vancouver, and Toronto that actually integrates with the public transit system. So, you know, when you now leave your home, not only can you think about to get from A to B, I can take an Uber X, but you can also see the transit options in the app. And over time, we'll integrate these more deeply, as we've done in Chicago and Sydney, to actually help you plan a fully multimodal journey, where you, for instance, can hop in an Uber X for your first mile, hop on transit for the duration of your journey, and again, hop in an X to get to where you need to go. The last thing we've done to start to make headway against the goal is a real commitment to transparency. So every year, we're going to release a climate assessment and performance report to actually detail how we're doing. And I think not only is transparency important, but it's also a starting point for us to collaborate with the public and private sector to work together to get this done. Climate change is a team sport. We cannot do this alone. We're just getting started. And my hope is kind of these actions together with transparency helps us figure out in Canada how we work together to really lead on this.
It looks like Uber is trying to take a leadership role in the evolution of mobility throughout the city, throughout cities in general. And one of the questions I have there is how will that affect the evolution of how we build and plan our cities? Like you had just mentioned, having more charging stations just integrated throughout how a city is built. And one of the things that I thought was, you know, will you be competing with public transit, for example? So how do you think this is going to affect policy in the cities moving forward, especially as mobility becomes a much more important ingredient to living in a city?
I think it's a really important point, and it really gets at the heart of we need to collaborate and do this together, because kind of no one player can transform how people move around cities. So, you know, what I spend a lot of time doing is I'm encouraging city planners, infrastructure developers to consider a bunch of things and how they think about planning. So whereas we once needed parking lots, and there's a lot of parking lots taking up space in the city of Toronto, what we now need are dedicated spaces for pickup and drop off of ride sharing. You know, where we once needed static bike racks to park that bike, that asset that I own, we now need places to kind of park or station shared bikes, shared e-scooters. And of course, going back to our zero emission commitment, we're going to need a lot more charging infrastructure than we have today, located in the right places, not just for ride sharing drivers, but I do believe for all Torontonians as this shift happens towards electric. And you also mentioned in the question kind of competing with transit. I want to be super clear. Public transit is the most efficient way to move mass amounts of people around city. There's no substitute for public transit. And the other thing to note is that micromobility, e-scooters, e-bikes, are also critical in terms of getting people from A to B in more congested times where we don't want to put more cars on our streets. So I think both of those are kind of critical partners in the transportation ecosystem, and we want to work with them. We want to work with them, and we want to work with all levels of government to be part of moving us in this direction.
It's so fascinating because every time I think about people just traveling around the city on an e-scooter, it's an image that just seems so far away from me. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, there is going to be something really exciting about a future where people are able to just get around in a lot of different ways. And if these are sustainable ways, that's even better. So this takes me to my next question, which is about artificial intelligence. Like, where does AI fall into this? Because self-driving cars will definitely be a part of our future. So what happens to Uber drivers as this becomes more of a reality? Will there be other ways for people to work within the Uber ecosystem?
So autonomous is definitely going to play a meaningful role in how we think about improving the safety of our streets and how we think about giving back you and I more our productive time. But I think the important thing for people to understand when they think about AI and when they think about autonomy is it's not going to defy the laws of physics. And we need to have the most efficient transportation system we can to then effectively, over time, slowly migrate in autonomous vehicles. And as we think about this as Uber, once that kind of proper, efficient, multimodal transportation ecosystem is in place, we slowly want to increase the proportion of cars in the fleet that are autonomous, which is actually why ride sharing is one of the most economical places for autonomous vehicles to begin. It's a way for those assets to be highly utilized and to share the cost across a bunch of different actors. But when you picture that world where slowly we're going from 1% to 10% to 20% of cars on the road that are autonomous, there's two things I'm pretty confident about. One, I'm pretty confident that there will always be use cases that are best served by human drivers. And again, one of the reasons why ride sharing is a great place for autonomy to enter is you can put the autonomous vehicle against the use cases that are best served by autonomous, and you can keep human drivers on those other use cases. The other thing I'm pretty confident about is there are going to be earning opportunities that open up for drivers in terms of supporting large fleets of autonomous vehicles. This is also a future that's well out there. And as I say, we have a lot of work to be done here in the near term to get the most efficient transportation infrastructure and ecosystem in place in our cities.
And this actually takes me to the next question, which is about, it's like going back to what we were discussing earlier. It's so true. Like part of me being able to just make it through this pandemic is I get Uber Eats probably 3 times a week now to help support local businesses. I want to support the restaurants that I love. I use Uber a lot now, obviously more so than public transportation. I just feel that it's a safer option. So these 2 core businesses have been helping people build resilience in the city as they live through the pandemic. Do you have anything else up your sleeve? Are you going to be launching any other core businesses over the course of this time that are just going to add more value and help people become more resilient during this challenging time?
I mean, the other business that we feel very strongly about and we're investing in, including here in Canada, is Uber Freight, which is moving goods across long distances. And in fact, Uber Freight has also played a critical role during this pandemic in terms of getting fresh produce and goods to the people that need it at times when kind of long haul transport infrastructure is being tied up for other purposes. But if I think about resilience, and we talked a little bit about how Uber's been a critical part of our transportation ecosystem. There's two other ways that I think the core businesses we have are helping build resilience in our cities. One is a flexible earning opportunity for people in desperate need during really difficult economic times. In fact, it's one of the reasons that we wanted to get Uber into Winnipeg and into Halifax, is to give people who need earning opportunities a chance to earn and to earn flexibly. And as we emerge from the pandemic in what appears to be a pretty deep and probably protracted recession, our hope is that's a real benefit to Torontonians. The other area, and maybe lesser known, is we've also done what we can to use our reach to communicate with Torontonians. We partnered with Toronto Public Health to get the message out to both riders and drivers about kind of how to move safely, about the importance of the COVID-19 tracing app. And again, just another way that I think private businesses in particular, business generally in a time, in a difficult time, can kind of work with the public sector to do good.
And it just seems like Uber has been working really hard to try to add value in a lot of different ways across all these different sectors, interact with people in a lot of different ways that are meaningful during this time. So where do you see Uber going next? Like, what is next for Uber in the short term if the pandemic continues to be a reality in 2021 and then down the road in the future?
I love the mindset of about kind of always pushing for more, always pushing forward. Look, Uber's 10 years old. Uber's been in Toronto now, I believe, for 7 or 8 years, but we're just getting started. A lot of people today see us as a competitor to taxi, and I get a lot of questions about competing with taxi. We're here to compete with the private car. That is fundamentally our vision, is to provide a credible alternative to the private vehicle. The private vehicle on our streets, normally with one person in the car, but as I say, that's only 5% of the problem, because that car sits idle 95% of the time. So I mean, what's next is continuing to make progress against a future where when you leave your house, you don't instinctively grab your keys and hop into your car, but you replace that car with your phone. You open your app, you choose where you want to go, and you're presented with the suite of options: UberX, Transit, e-scooter, e-bike. What's next is continuing to offer the most flexible earning opportunity we can from coast to coast across this country to help Canadians live the lives they want to live, and whether that is a flexible opportunity to work when you want, where you want, for how long you want, or it's just a way to add some extra income to complement the rest of your life. And then, as we talked about, I think what's next is really truly helping build greener, cleaner cities. And I'm really excited about the work we're going to do between here and 2030, with hopes that some Canadian cities will be the first in North America where we can say we have a fully electric zero-emission platform.
I love the way you position that, just competing with the private car. It's so funny. I have a car in my garage right now, but it's true. Like, sometimes if it's like an important meeting and I want to get there, I'd probably rather take an Uber than drive, because I know parking downtown is probably going to be a bit of an issue. So that's a really great way to position it. And in terms of the other markets that you're in, like, these are really interesting, bold, ambitious plans. You can be honest. Is Canada a great place to do this stuff? Is Canada a really good place to beta test and use as a case study for the rest of the world?
So, I mean, Canada is a really important business for us at Uber globally. And I mean, the fact that we now operate in 20 cities across this country, I think is evidence to the fact that both Canadian policymakers and Canadians more broadly have embraced the concept of ride sharing, and for riders, see the benefits of affordable, convenient transportation that is safe, that is reliable, and for drivers, that flexible earning opportunity. I think the one area where Canada is slow, and I would encourage, and we're working with policymakers across this country, is when it comes to micromobility, and the benefits of micromobility to our cities. Lime has proven to be an incredibly efficient operator of electric bikes and scooters. And if you look at the impact that they've had in Calgary, I think that is a good case study. And in particular here in Toronto, we think it's a critical part of the transportation infrastructure and something that Canada needs to catch up to the rest of the world on. It is part of the future. We need to figure out how to do it and do it in a way that works in Canada.
All I know is that if I can get a scooter, I would be rolling through on that thing all the time. That would be my thing. That would be my look. I just roll through. Oh, it's Jana's scooter. He's killing it yet again. So we're going to open it up for questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, please put them into the chat, and we'll ask Matthew the questions. But before we jump into the questions from the audience, my last question to you, Matthew, is: so what is next for you? And do you have any New Year's resolutions you'd like to share?
Topical question. Look, I normally take advantage of New Year's as a bit of a forcing mechanism to reflect on the bad habits, to root them out, to build new ones. But I mean, as I said off the top, I mean, I think COVID-19 has been that moment of reflection and has really taken care of that. So I don't have New Year's resolutions I'll share with you, but what I will share is a couple of things that I hope for all of us. And that as a general manager of Uber in Canada, I'm committed to putting our resource behind getting done. And the first is working together to quicken the pace of vaccine distribution in this country. I think something where all of our interests are aligned. At Uber, we're exploring how we can help and including ensuring that people can get to vaccination centers affordably and quickly once up and running. The other one is the governments really take this as an opportunity to build back better. I think sustainability is one area that we're looking forward to partnering with government, but there are others, and I'm looking forward to sharing more on that soon.
That idea of build back better is so interesting too, because yes, like it's a lot of people are taking this opportunity to reimagine what the city can mean or reimagine their lives. And then there's also this drive towards normalcy. And this is actually a good jumping point into this question. So jumping into an Uber at least 5 times a day was a norm for me before COVID hit. It truly was part of my life day to day. What would you say would be the best way you're getting riders back into that mindset and bringing it back into our daily routines?
So, I mean, I think we're not there yet. We're still very much in the midst of a pandemic and one that's having real impact in this country. And, you know, our focus is very much on ensuring that our platform is as safe as it can be to get people who need to move from A to B there in the right ways. And I talked earlier about some of the things we've done in terms of trying to bolster the safety of our platform: no mask, no ride policy, selfie verification technology that you are in fact wearing a mask, so working with public health authorities on contact tracing. But I have to say that continues to be our focus at the moment, and ensuring that the Canadians who need to move can move. I'm looking forward to getting back to a world where we can think about kind of new and emerging consumer behaviors and how we take advantage and capture them on our platform, but too soon. Still very much focused on helping Canada through this difficult pandemic.
And it's this thing too, where it's like, you know, when you go Google something or let's Uber somewhere, it's like this verb. And it seems like the verb is going to be encompassing a lot of things, hopefully moving forward, that are just extra valuable in your life. So are there any other questions from the audience? If so, please put them into the chat, and then we can get them to Matthew. I got to say, it probably is because you were incredibly detailed, and you answered a lot of the questions I'm sure a lot of people had. But yeah, it looks like there are no questions. So congratulations, Matthew. That was a fantastic masterclass in terms of just some of the things that Uber is doing as a business, and just in terms of some of the practices Uber has as a business that we can apply and scale out to our own businesses. That idea of the transparency, adding value in as many different ways as possible, and also larger goals, these larger, more aspirational goals for like a better, sustainable future. It's really exciting to see, and it's nice to see an organization like Uber taking a leadership role in all of that. So I'd like to thank you for joining us today.
I appreciate that, Jason. And maybe I'll just finish on, I think this pandemic has brought silver linings, personally and professionally. But I think, when I look at business, one silver lining at the moment I'm seeing is, a real kind of embrace of corporate social responsibility, and businesses that didn't understand the importance of corporate social responsibility, businesses that didn't see the shared value that could be created in public and private working together. I think this has been a real wake-up call, and I'm excited to see what businesses working with government in Canada can do in the months and years ahead to make this the best place it can be to live and to work.
Matthew, if you can also get me a vaccine ASAP, if Uber can get me a vaccine ASAP, I would love that too. But thank you this was actually a super great, efficient, quick one. But thank you so much for joining us again today, Matthew. And thank you so much to all of our TL Insider members who joined this conversation. We actually are going to be seeing a lot more from the teams over at Uber. We have a great partnership with Uber in place. We're going to be working with them a lot. Stay tuned for it in April. But again, thank you for joining us. Please stay safe, and hopefully we will be seeing you again in person very, very soon. But Matthew, thank you so much for joining us today and for joining TL Insider.
Thanks again, Jason. Take care, everyone.